my less than 20 minutes remarks are going to be about strategies. I think you heard enough about theology, ideology, not enough. I think we could hear more. But I would like to go to the map, the geopolitical map of this war of ideas, not the military one. The NGOs that we're working with, that's a good way to begin my remarks, are in fact doing what the US government should have been doing. That's what Bob was talking about. We should not be in the business of waging a war of ideas while billions of dollars are dedicated, earmarked by Congress to so many agencies that, in principle, should be the ones to countering the extremist ideas. Now, of course, we hear that those programs exist, and I've been, God, how many times part of advising bodies on these issues. But I can reiterate what the members of the panel have affirmed. We are not, as the United States, at this point in time, we are not waging this war of ideas, and if we are waging it on the side of those who are opposing us. That's very simple, that's very dramatic. These efforts are important, the efforts of these NGOs and foundations, so that we can inform the American public. This is a democracy. And now we know these days on the Syria issue, how important are now votes in the lawmakers' assemblies across the Atlantic. So lawmakers represent public opinion. And if public opinion is not informed, if public opinion, for example, continues to ask the question, what's the difference between a Shia and a Sunni, we have a problem. Or where is Syria? Or if the Middle East is the other side of the Middle West. We are at a very dramatic level of misinformation, disinformation, and no information. I mean, you are all on social media. And many among you teach in undergrad and graduates. Many among you I know. And you know how problematic is the beginning of a semester when you teach Middle Eastern studies. Very problematic. So in a void like this, obviously the most organized, the most concentrated, strategic forces in the space of the war of ideas, in the same way the most organized forces in Egypt, Libya, and Tunisia have seized the moment and grabbed powers at the beginning, or almost at the beginning of the spring, of the Arab Spring, it is happening here as well. Whenever we have a choice in foreign policy and national security, what happens? You have a debate in this building and across into the White House and in the elite media. But our public is very far away from understanding. We have probably, I calculated, 1 million, over 300 million Americans who understand what we're talking about. That's all the bloggers, all the leaders, all the social media, all the graduate, undergraduate studies, all workers in federal and state levels dealing with these issues. That's 1 million people. When we deal with the social issue, who divorced who, right? In the social matter, you have 280 million people who understand what we're talking about. But when we deal with the Middle East or national security, very few. And in the void comes the organized forces in the war of ideas. I am going to be talking about 4 points. Point number 1 is that there is an original crisis, which is the mothership, the root cause for the battle we are engaging, and that is the crisis in Middle Eastern studies in this country, the academic crisis. This is the genesis. This is where it all begins. I'll make the case. And point number 2, I will talk about how we conducted foreign policy since 9/11 in terms of the war of ideas, and how the fact that Middle Eastern studies were compromised, it had a major impact on the way we failed when we could have. Let me say post 9/11, the Bush administration, regardless of who was the president, but we were responding, we were trying, we were spending, we were creating. We liberated a couple places in the Middle East, couple countries. Yet, we were not able to win the war of ideas as we were winning the war against the terrorists. It's mind-boggling. Then comes a third period, which I'll talk about quickly, is when the government, the administration that is, actually espoused the ideas of the Islamists or of Middle Eastern studies elites that has been influenced by the Islam. Then there is no problem. Under the Bush administration, we were going in a direction and we had pushbacks. Under the Obama administration, there is no pushbacks. It's all going in one direction. That's why we're making one problem, one failure after the other in the Middle East, one after the other. It's very bad advice coming from those who should be the elite in thinking, who should be standing here and addressing us. And last, if we can, if we have time, few remarks about suggestions. I'm not going to be very optimistic on the suggestions. We'll make the suggestions, and then I'm going to conclude that we can't do them right now. So the Middle East Studies Crisis, which I've developed in a couple books. The first book, some of you are maybe familiar with, the Future Jihad, Terror Strategies Against America. And the second book, which title is relevant to our discussion, The War of Ideas, Democracy Against Jihadism. The crisis in Middle Eastern studies basically is a crisis of what I call politically a penetration. Many among you are experts on this. It's really a deep influence exerted by an organized network that is basically a front or influence or working with, partnering with the Muslim Brotherhood. I know many experts here have done a great job in exposing this, so I'm not going to duplicate this. But it's important to begin where the problem has been. Of course, there has been the influence of the Iranian lobby. In Future Jihad, I describe the general Islamist lobby as having two branches, the same branches that exist in the Middle East. One is coming from the petrodollars inserted in our systems somewhere after 1973 to the oil shock, into the 80s, and increasingly in the 90s. There was a huge insurgence of petrodollars, donations. Now, what did they target, these donations? They targeted precisely the nerve system of our academic world, and that would be Middle Eastern studies, Islamic studies, international relations, political science dealing with that region. And I know, because I have been teaching for the last 20 years on many campuses, and I know even more, because I have been in the debate, including within the Arab media sphere for the last 10, 12 years. Every day, I'm in the Arab media debate. So I know the ideas on both sides. And that's not a very comfortable position, because you know that your side is losing. When you see both sides in a chess game, and you see how the moves are coming, and you see that on your side there are no moves or counter moves or wrong moves, you are in a bad situation. Those fundings came to Middle Eastern studies from the most prominent Ivy Leagues to the smallest colleges in Arkansas. But there's a big one there now. And what it did, basically, it impacted the way we teach in the classroom. And when you actually impact the classroom, you have a series of impacts that goes after that. It's almost mathematical. When you impact the classroom, meaning you are compromising the understanding of the region, the various forces of the region, the ideologies of the region, you start calling the Islamists revivalists. When I showed up in this country, I immigrated 23 years ago, and I was at MESA, Middle East Studies Association of North America. It's the NRA of Middle Eastern Studies in this country. And I was surprised to hear prominent speakers introduced as the gods of Middle Eastern studies, talking about the jihadists and the Islamists as the revivalists, meaning almost quasi-reformers, and later on they call them reform. This is where the problem is coming from. It's the original sin, quote unquote, obviously, not from a theological perspective here. So when the classroom is going to produce graduates or undergraduates to go occupy other rooms, then we are in a systemic problem. It's not what the president sees or doesn't see, it's the whole system that is problematic. Because from the classroom, you go to the newsroom, the media. You know how many thousands of times you have been protesting against why is it that the New York Times, the Washington Post, and the LA Times, and C-SPAN, and the whole list are not doing well with these issues. And these are brilliant people. They have PhDs that size. It doesn't matter the size of your PhD. If one part of it is wrong, you're done. If you can't understand that Osama bin Laden in 1998, that was another of my discoveries, was, after he did the strikes and after he declared war against the United States and the Crusaders and Zionists and Jews, page 6,000 on the New York Times, as so important it was for them, they called him a Saudi dissident. Now that's a classroom problem, and I know why. Instead of saying this is the leader of the new jihadist movement, therefore there are strategies and ideologies and prepare yourself for the 9/11 that could come, all of the New York Times and of course their brothers and sisters have interpreted bin Laden to be as a Saudi dissident upset with the Saudi royal family. No, that was not the case. That's just a tiny little example, but there are thousands of examples which I could give later on. So now we have the newsroom, media is impacted. But then there is the courtroom. Remember, those law students, political science students, are going to be becoming what? Judges, lawyers, defense lawyers. So all our questions about why is it that our court system is not able to understand that there is an ideology, why is it that they can't see it? Well, it goes back to the origin of the issue. And I have been, disclosing this now, for 20 years, an expert witness, many among you have been, in courts, and I saw, it's disastrous. If every player in the room doesn't understand what the issue is about, should it be about terrorism or political asylum cases, we are in trouble. And last but not least, the war room, the government. The war room. Decisions on national security and on international foreign policy issues are always the product of policy papers. You're familiar with that. And of advising. The policymaker is not an expert in these issues. He or she are told about these issues. So whomever has the network that can surround the policymakers with what to do, and we've seen it this week. I'm going to hint. It's not just, the administration. Even its opposition is contaminated. With regard to Syria, with regard to understanding what are the forces on the ground. We call them the rebels. I'm sure there will be a lot of discussions about what is the rebels. And I'm surprised, very surprised, that 3 years into the Arab Spring, we still have questions on major TV networks, who are the rebels? Who are the rebels after 3 years? If we don't have an idea about 3 years, we are in, again, free problem. Now, this compromised Middle Eastern studies world that occupied most of our elites, and thanks to the world of NGOs and bloggers, the alternative world of thinking Middle East, which is part of what we do here. I mean, part of us, of course, have been advising government, but the mainstream in executive branch is not thinking the way we do. We understand that. Those who advise the higher echelons in the executive power are professors that we engage on panels, and we know their thinking. We don't need to, guess it too much. We know what it is. And we see it when a press release goes out of the State Department or National Security Council or the White House, or at some point from members of this power here, this branch of power. The problem in the agenda that was set, that led to a failure in the war of ideas, in my sense, is, number one, they have promoted, this elite in academic Middle East studies has promoted the Islamists in the Middle East as the revivalists, as I have mentioned, but with a consequence, a political consequence. If these are the revivalists, then these will be our partners. Hence, you understand why is it that relentlessly, despite every piece of information analysis that these circles have been pushing back, the Muslim Brotherhood have been always been seen by the mainstream academia, therefore media, and therefore government, as potential partners with all the mistakes they've done. It's not just that a delegation of MB showed up in Washington and everybody rushed in. No, it's a much older issue. It's how you interpret them. It's not how what they say about themselves. They're a failure in their own propaganda. They don't know how to say things. But there is an elite that coaches them and say this is how they will lead the region from the old times, and they will push back against Al-Qaeda. We know the narrative that the defenders of the Muslim Brotherhood in this city and elsewhere, we know it to the details. It's not even a secret. The idea is that the Muslim Brotherhood or the Salafists, and of course the Iranian branch on the other hand, are those revolutionary forces that are going to be changing the region and moving forward. They have some problems, but we can bypass that. That's the essence today of the administration's strategic view of the Middle East. I mean, we can work with those, and they're doing it. They are convinced that this is the truth. Two, the authoritarian regimes in the region, some are against us. Saddam, Gaddafi, we could either turn them around or turn them down or bring them down. And those who are with us, such as Mubarak and Ben Ali and, of course, the monarchs. And the issue is going to be that in this region, we need to have strategic long-term partners. The monarchs and the moderates will be there as long as they can handle their societies. But on the long term, we need an organized social force. Remember those words. You could go back to your archives and see that officials in the US government have been using social forces, organizing social force. These are words to determine who the Islamist or the Muslim Brotherhood have been. Third, and more important here in the agenda setting, was that civil society, seculars and Democrats, or secular Democrats, are too Western. Did you hear that? I'm sure you did. in the pushback by our elite against the very people that this panel and the previous panels have been trying to work with, meaning the Muslim reformers, Middle Eastern reformers, Arab reformers, and dissidents. The accusation against them, right, Tufi? The accusation against them is that they are too westernized and they represent the face of America. Now the 33 million Egyptians who walk on the streets of Egypt on June the 30th and again on July the 26th blasted the theory to the end. No, that's not true. They want exactly what we want, but they don't control the resources to get to where we, not exactly in terms of each country, each nation has its own cultural coloration, of course. But the driving forces in those regions, within those societies, even, and I'm arguing something that many of my colleagues would push back against me, even the non-educated have pulsions, have instincts. And those instincts are always rising when they see a voice that is freed and democratic and secularizing. They will push against those authoritarian ideas. So with these 3 points, the US strategy in the region after 9/11 was divided in 2. The first one, under the Bush administration, obviously, was that we liberate and then we provoke democracy return. Iraq, Afghanistan, and in other instances. Then second, the messaging, we will give the opinion, the American view, we will protect the American image, and in return, we're going to see the natural rise of democratic forces. Everything should be by the book, automatic. Now, what happened in reality, according to my view, is that while the intention at the top was fine, was going in the right direction, I looked at the speeches, I heard the speeches as you did, between 01 and 09. The speeches were going in the right direction. The problem has been that the bureaucracy did not walk the walk of the administration. The actual bureaucracy. Now, who's sitting in the bureaucracy? Those who are sitting in the bureaucracy, the ideas sitting in the bureaucracy, are influenced by that academic elite. Now, there is a whole discussion about our media, the US-funded media. Well, the US-funded media, the news about it is that while we were at the golden age and golden opportunity to reach out to these civil societies, to these democracy forces, to these minorities, we haven't. Because that media, even under the Bush administration, was not going in the right direction of its own narrative, of the narrative of the president and of the majority of Congress till 2006. The messaging, for example, especially the Arab broadcast and the Persian broadcast, we got reactions from the region. People, dissidents, were calling us. What's wrong with Al-Hurra? What's wrong with Sawa? What's wrong with Radio Farda? What's wrong with the Persian and other services of the VOA? They were not complaining about music to me or about story. They were complaining about the actual message in the news. How come we have Hamas version aired by your US-funded media? How come Sayyid Nasrallah, Hassan Nasrallah of Hezbollah, is walking and talking and beaming out of your media, and our dissident leaders are not? We have never heard Copts out of Al-Hurra, Al-Sawa, or the other networks, or even VOA. I mean, we may have heard one time. Instead of following the VOA strategy during the Cold War, where the focus was on Eastern European and Central European dissidents, and Lech Walesa and Václav Havel, and all the dissidents in the Soviet Union, that was why VOA was created. We did not have that after 9/11, even though we have liberated 2 spots in the Middle East, and the rest, I'll let my colleagues dealing with this. Now, the problem, last point here, is that as of 2009, what was a contradiction between the line of the administration in engaging and the line of the bureaucracy, we have emerged between the administration and the bureaucracy in going absolutely in the other direction. And that was very clear. First interview after the election of President Obama was with Al Arabiya. Talking points, basically, we are wrong, you are right, we're going to change that. We're going to change our policy. We are not going to impose, when a politician, a leader, or an elite says to the other side of the world, we are wrong, we are colonialist, we are imposing on you, and even the concept of democracy is wrong for you. That's what Harvard and Georgetown are saying. then of course you're going to have a visibility given to the forces in the region that are Islamist, and they are espousing that issue. And then we had, of course, in June of 2009, the very famous speech or remarks made about the rise of the Green Revolution in Iran. I don't need to go back to the details. That was an important direction for the policy to come. The speech in Cairo was an important speech because it told us already what the U.S. position with regard to a potential Arab Spring is going to be. It was already done in Cairo. Some among you have wrote about this issue. And indeed, when the first wave, and here I may have a lot of different points of view with different of my friends and colleagues in our circles, I have always argued that the Muslim Brotherhood were preparing for events, but did not initiate those events. And we could have a panel on this. Those who initiated those events were the weakest elements of civil societies in the Middle East. And the evidence is, the Muslim Brotherhood have been there for 80 years. They have tried and tried and tried and tried. How many armed uprisings have they done? Many. They failed. But when weak civil society, Facebook, YouTube groups in Tunisia and Egypt, a little bit of Libya, but also the beginning of Syria started, what has happened is that the international community, because this was civil society, extended an umbrella. It's feasible, it's permissible, especially in Cairo, Tahrir Square. When the umbrella was extended, now you can expect what would happen later. The Brotherhood came in, the most organized came in, and the rest is history as you know it. The seizure of Egypt, of Tunisia with Nahda, of half of Libya at least with the Salafists, and of what is happening in Syria today. In less than a minute, because my time is up, it's done, I would like to make a large couple recommendations. Number one, there need to be a change, a fundamental change in direction, in policy direction. We cannot nibble and try and do tactics with the current direction of US policy. It's not going to work. I tried. I tested. I wish we had different results in November. We would have been doing something else now. Not yet successful, but we would have been in different spheres. There need to be a change of a strategic change of direction. And it is unescapable. It will have to be done first in Congress and second with the administration. This administration or the next one. And I'm not reinventing the wheel. And last, we need to partner with civil society, which is what this panel is all about. Thank you so much.